Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Total Saints podcast. We're the dedicated weekly pod that goes to the heart of all things Southampton Football Club. My name is Ben Stanfield, the original founder of TSP, and nowadays, when Martin's away, ad hoc holiday cover. Joining me are the regular trio of Steve Grant, Glen de la Cour, and the Daily Echo's chief sports reporter, Alfie House. As always, we're live streaming on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. If you're watching along and have the ability to do so, please do get involved and leave your comments or questions in the chat as we go. This podcast is entirely supported by our loyal Patreon community. Without them, we simply couldn't make the show each week. And we have another 5 new patrons who've joined over the last 7 days. So a huge thank you and welcome to Mike E, Spencer Houghton, Gabe Downing, and Brian Cox in our Bobby Stokes tier. And a very big happy birthday to you as well, Brian. Also, thanks to Gavin Ford, who signed up to our Francis Benali tier. Like all our existing global patrons, we truly appreciate your support. And if you're mulling over whether to become a patron or not, I'll have a bit more information on how you can join at the end of the show. Right, coming up on the podcast, it's been a week of ups and almost downs as Saints won in Devon, but the expected signing of midfielder Flynn was delayed by illness. We'll reflect on yesterday's dramatic 2-1 victory at Home Park. If C.S. Lewis was still alive, then he'd surely be tempted to write a book about this summer's main transfer saga. Yes, involving a variety of twists and turns, the Chronicles of Lavia finally came to an end on Friday when Saints midfielder Romeo joined Chelsea. I'll get the guys' thoughts on the deal alongside what else might or should now happen before the transfer window closes. And Queen's Park Rangers are the next championship visitors to the South Coast. We'll speak to Ben Platt from the W12 Podcast about all things hoops. Underpinned by our TSP patrons, this is episode 240 of the Total Saints Podcast. Before we get stuck into the Plymouth game, we've had a couple of notes through from the Southern Hemisphere this week that I'd like to mention. The first is from Declan Archer, a Saints fan based down in Melbourne, Australia. Declan writes, I'm 23 and have been a Saints fan since the promotion championship season back in 2011. Most people down here follow a Big Six club, so I cop a fair bit of stick, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Earlier this year, my fiancée and I saved up all our money and headed over to the UK with a trip to watch Saints play, one of the main reasons for our visit. Unfortunately, the game I picked was peak Nathan Jones ball versus Nottingham Forest at home. We travelled all the way across the world and didn't see a win, a draw, a goal, or even a shot on target. Despite that, what mattered most to me that day was being part of the city and club that have given me so much joy, even if I do live thousands of kilometres away. I tune in to TSP every week, and it's genuinely something I always look forward to. Keep doing what you're doing, and let's have a great season. Thanks for the message, Declan. I'm sorry it was such a bad game, although I suppose, as Alfie will agree, it wasn't complete doom and gloom, as you did get to enjoy a world-class light show. Anyway, a big thanks to you and all the Saints fans who listen to us in Australia, particularly our Aussie-based TSP patrons. The second message was from even further afield. Paul T got in touch from New Zealand. He says, I'm a long-suffering Saints fan, originally from Fair Oak, now a regular TSP listener. I'm based in Gisborne on the east coast of New Zealand. I'm wondering if I am your most distant listener. Cheers, Paul. Well, Google tells me that Gisborne is roughly 11,600 miles from Southampton, so there's a high chance you are, Paul. But here's a challenge to our watchers and listeners. If you can beat 11,600 miles from Southampton, drop us a note to totalsaintspodcast@yahoo.com. We'd love to hear from you. Really appreciate the message, Paul. And as it stands at the moment, I think you're our most distant listener. So the award is yours until anyone can beat that. Okay, let's get into the football. Saints' latest championship fixture saw them travel to our favourite UK city, built on a rich maritime history, beginning with the letter P, Plymouth. The score eventually finishing 2-1 to us. Glen, what did you make of the 90 minutes? A cliche game of two halves?
It was a little bit. The first half was kind of generally poor, I thought, and Russell Martin said as much after the game that there wasn't enough intensity in our attacking play. I didn't think our defending was too bad. I think we'd learnt a few lessons from the Norwich game, and the centre backs in particular were definitely being slightly more aggressive whenever the ball got up to the forwards. But our attacking play, we just seemed to be, passing it around for the sake of it, and there didn't seem to be a lot going on. There was a few mistakes as well. Having said that, we still we still probably should have worked the goalkeeper more in the first half. Nathan Teller had one really good chance where he kind of scuffed it after the ball got played across to him a couple of times. But yeah, nothing much happened in the first half. Plymouth didn't threaten much, and the Show Charles got that booking, which was the highlight of the first half for me, where he's getting his shirt pulled off his back, so his arms go up in the air, the ball hits it, and he gets booked. It's just stunning refereeing. And I'm sure we'll probably get onto the referee later. Second half, we obviously Russell Martin obviously said something at half time, which made everyone come out with a little bit more intent. Nearly scored straight away through a dozy, and then did score through Teller. Good goal, good finished. And there's that old cliche about you're never more vulnerable when you've than when you've just scored, because one slip from Ryan Manning, and that was unfortunate, but we still could have done a hell of a lot more to prevent that goal. No one picking up the runners, and the guy scores from virtually in front of the goalkeeper, because just no one's doing their job. I'll give Manning a bit of a pass on that, because anyone can slip at any moment, but the other guys have to do better there. After that, again, it was a bit like the Sheffield Wednesday game, where you kind of think, yeah, we're going to have chances. I mean, Stewie at the bar, and we had that free kick from Armstrong that the keeper made a really good save from. Yeah, and there was always this feeling Plymouth hadn't really done anything, but they, I thought they were going to give that penalty, and then you see the replay of it and realise it's a horrible dive, and it should be a 3-game ban, but obviously that doesn't happen. Apparently, he's known for it. If you have it, I did a bit of research after the game to see if he'd been called for it before, and if you just type in Hardy dive, there's loads of fans from loads of other teams going back a bit. So apparently he always does it. And yeah, last 97th minute, whatever it was, we get the winning goal. I was going to say Adams couldn't miss, but he's missed from closer than that before. But it was, it was. I thought it was a deserved win overall. If you look at the highlights, really Argyle didn't really do that much. They had a few openings, after they pitched the ball off us high up, or even on the break, and they didn't seem to have the quality, apart from the one goal that they did score, to play the right pass. Really disappointed in a good way in Barley Mumba on the left wing, because he was terrible. He was one that was possibly going to cause us a lot of problems, but he had a terrible game. But whether it was because he was playing, Walker Peters, okay, he didn't cover himself in glory on their goal, but he had a pretty decent game other than that, and kept him pretty quiet. So yeah, it was a decent all-round performance, and though we left it late, I thought it was a deserved win in the end.
Yeah. A bit like Glen, Steve, Russell Martin said after the game, I think that he felt Saints deserved to win overall as well. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. That second half, we were the side making the running, and let's be honest, the only keeper that's actually been forced into making any sort of a save, pretty much in the whole game, was theirs. So yeah, I mean, from what I've read of Plymouth comments, most of them were fairly sort of pragmatic and said, yeah, we probably Saints probably edged it, but I think Plymouth on that showing they're not going to be in any danger at the bottom end of the table. I wouldn't have thought they were fine, but just lacked a little bit of cutting edge. I don't know whether it was a particularly big game for them, and therefore they just didn't quite make the right decisions. I mean, there were 2 or 3 occasions where they got into really good positions in the first half. I mean, one thing that we do that I'm still a little bit baffled by is we defend really narrow. Even on the side of the pitch where the ball is. So the fullback is rarely outside of the sort of width of the penalty area. And that gives teams so much space to put balls into the box. And there was one that came in where I think the ball was just bad, and it was probably half a yard behind the striker, and he had to then take a touch and try and turn, and by then you're always going to be getting crowded out. But there are a couple, I think, where they worked their way into the box and then they managed to block their own shot. So you just have players in getting in each other's way, getting in the wrong positions, and just didn't seem to be a huge amount of synergy between them, which was odd, given that this is largely the same team that got them promoted. So yeah, I think ultimately you probably just put that down to us being vaguely competent for once. It seems strange for us to describe our defending as such, but yeah, I mean we were kind of fine. I thought while you're always worried given what we've seen over the past couple of years when we're running back towards our own goal and the opposition's running at us and the ball gets played wide and the guy's in loads of space. You're always absolutely terrified naturally. But actually it kind of felt a little bit different here, because after the first 5 minutes where they had 2 or 3 good balls into the box where either there was a desperate clearance or someone managed to get a block in, after that we kind of seemed to get a handle on it and looked relatively composed. So I mean, I wonder whether that's a positive sign for the future. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you can only beat what's in front of you. And second half, we were, as I say, comfortably the better side, made all the chances, and but some better finishing would have won it much earlier and by a wider margin, I suspect.
Yeah. Alfie, 2 weeks ago, it felt like we had an abundance of midfielders. Suddenly, by yesterday, with 4 of them either sold or out injured, we were in a slightly different situation. It obviously meant Russell Martin had to tweak that a little bit. So what did you make of the Shay Charles? Obviously, him making his first league start. He got Sky Player of the Match, Stuart Armstrong, Adam Armstrong. What did you make of that trio?
Yeah, well, if you told me a year ago that you'd have a midfield partnership of Adam Armstrong and Stuart Armstrong, I would have... I'd been very surprised, to say the least.
Terrified.
But, yeah, absolutely. But, like I say, Shay Charles was really good. He was really impressive against Norwich, and he deserved this start. Not that there was much choice. I think they found out that Will was not going to be available, obviously, last weekend. But Charlie Alcaraz was available up until Wednesday afternoon, and then they had the scan Thursday, and he was ruled out. So it left him in a bit of a pickle, with Romeo Lavia and Ward-Prowse going as well. Well, I knew that Adam Armstrong would be the obvious choice. I think people were saying that looking at the 11, it would be a 4-4-2, but he's already spoken about Adam Armstrong playing in the 10, playing in the 8, whatever you want to call it. And let's be fair, he did unbelievably well, didn't he? I think he had 4 shots, most any Saints player, tied with Nathan Teller. 4 chances created, same with Nathan Teller. 6 or 7 progressive carries in the middle of the park, which is all he's had all season. He hadn't actually made one before yesterday. I just thought he was excellent. Defensive duels in both boxes, and then the 90th minute tackle, obviously, as well, to save the 2 points. And, playing in the James Ward-Prowse role, he's stepped up to a free kick, and I thought he'd hit one as good as Ward-Prowse for a little while. But Connor Hazard made an unbelievable save. It was unbelievable, yeah. But, look, it's not
worth noting how bad their wall was for that, by the way.
Yeah, true.
It wasn't really a wall, was it?
Yeah. But with the midfield options available, I think that Stuart Armstrong, Shay Charles and Adam Armstrong, they've helped Russell Martin out there massively. I'd like to think that there'll be Flynn Downs in by next weekend, and maybe we'll see Flynn play slightly further forward and maybe Armour on the wing or up front, depending on what happens with Adams again. But yeah.
Yeah, I saw someone say during the week maybe he's waiting behind Matt Holland in the medical room for a medical. So that'll mean one to lots of the Saints fans that remember that. But just briefly, Alfie, on Stuart Armstrong, because I think it was maybe the press conference you were at where Russell Martin said, I think, quote, I'm paraphrasing here, sorry, but he's never seen Stuart Armstrong as a winger. He's always seen him as a centre midfielder. So it already feels like he's kind of made his mind up that that's his best position anyway.
I think he was saying that, that's what Stewie wants as well. Obviously Russell's seen him play when he was at Rangers, when Stuart was obviously at Celtic, and they played together for Scotland, and he'd always been a centre midfielder then. So that's how he'd known that. And I think what I gathered from what Russell was saying is that Stu, one of the reasons he felt like he probably wanted to leave the club this summer was to pursue this midfield role, this centre midfield role. And Russell was all behind it. And, I didn't necessarily think it was the right thing at first. I always saw him more of a winger as well. I don't know what you, Glen and Steve, think.
Well, it was a Ralph thing, wasn't it? To fit him into the 4-2-2. He couldn't play centre midfield in a 2. He's just not disciplined enough to do that. So they made him the de facto right winger. And after a while, he did a really good job there. And that's kind of where he's played for us. Because was Ralph the manager when we signed him? I'll lose track.
I think Mark Hughes was here.
Mark Hughes probably was, but when
because
it was that summer, wasn't it?
Yeah, he scored at Fulham, didn't he? Which was Hughes's last away game where he got a volley.
So I know when he played for Celtic, they always kind of played in midfield 3, and he played to the left hand side of in the centre sort of thing, which is much the same as what he's doing now. So no, I think he ended up there simply because Ralph wanted to shoehorn players into the 4-2-2 formation.
Yeah, and Steve, another late goal, as we've obviously said, to win it. I mean, so far this season now in 3 games, that's 87th minute winner, Sheffield Wednesday, the 97th minute penalty against Norwich, and then 94th minute against Plymouth. It's a good sign, I suppose, for the season ahead that this team's keeping going right to the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those where the players that we've got, because they're coming down from the Premier League, they should naturally be better players than the guys that they're coming up against week in, week out. And I think as a result, you will eventually grind these teams down. That's generally what we're finding. Like Wednesday, they sat in deep and they were happy to concede possession for as long as we were happy to have it. Plymouth slightly less so. They were a little bit more proactive, but yeah, it's a similar thing where you've just got to be patient. And fortunately, we have been, and we've not kind of decided, like the Norwich game, it would have been very easy for us to just start lumping the ball into the box in that injury time period. But no, we know what works best for us, and we kept at it, because at the end of the day, there's no point in us lumping the ball in the box for I mean, what have we got at best? A 5'10" centre forward. I mean, Adams is decent in the air, but you can't have him up against 2 massive centre backs on his own. Yeah, sure, he might beat them once in a while, but balance of probability is not on your side there. So the fact that already the players have been drilled into this system of trusting we're going back to last season and the horrors of
trust the process.
I knew you were going to say
that. is the thing. But when you've got a process that people have actually seen working, then by all means do it. That's the key. The problem last season was that Ruben Sellers was coming out saying trust the process, and yet we're watching us lose every week. You
that
cannot
was the
place
process.
you can't place any trust in that. Whereas here we're already seeing results, and we're seeing late results where we're keeping going, and we have to use resources off the bench just like every other side, but the resources that we've got are making a difference, and they're not a huge step down, if any at all. We've got a bit of depth in kind of key attacking positions, I think. It's just I think there's a little bit of a depth issue elsewhere on the pitch, but for the most part we've got options off the bench where we need to kind of force things a little bit. And I think certainly scoring late goals gives you confidence, and you always feel that you can go right to the end. And you look at how many goals Wrexham are scoring late on, obviously they're constantly in the news, which is fairly tedious. But when they scored twice in injury time yesterday to get that ludicrous 5-5 draw, and they were doing it all season in the National League. When you've got better attacking resources than the opposition's defence, then eventually you will break through. You've just got to give it time and show a bit of patience and trust that it will fall for you eventually.
I don't know how scientific this is, but Ryan Manning did say to me at Hillsborough after they scored the late winner there that Russell Martin's teams do score late goals, because if you dominate the ball 60-70% of the time, you have more energy than your opponents naturally. So I don't know how scientific that is, but
and that was one of the things Russell Martin said when he first came in, that it's easier to play football when you've got the ball. And you need less energy to do it. So I think certainly in the case of the Sheffield Wednesday game and the game against Plymouth, I definitely think that was the case. The Norwich game is slightly different, but I think that we've definitely worn those teams down. So we were always the more likely to score in the last few minutes.
Yeah, Glenn, I'm going to ask you about Sam Amo-Ameyaw in a minute, but just briefly, just because I can see quite a few comments about this, Alfie, and there was quite a lot of noise, I think, around Twitter as well. I suppose with Romeo Lavia being fit again. Obviously, Ryan didn't cover himself in glory with the 4th goal, I think it was, at Norwich last week. Slipped yesterday. He's also got a couple of bookings and things like that. Do you feel like for him, it's just sort of maybe getting used to a bit of a new environment? There's, obviously the team's performing quite well, but I suppose in terms of maybe minor negatives, it's already, it feels like fans are maybe just starting to get a few question marks around him. And, maybe it'll just take him a few games to get up to speed with the way the rest of the squad plays.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, sorry, is that Glenn or me?
Yeah, for you, Alfie,
yeah, sorry. It's a game of opinions, but I don't necessarily agree. He's made a couple of mistakes, but I actually think that he's been one of the more involved players. If you look at it in terms of passes and touches, he's always on the ball. He's always making things happen. He's visibly organising people in front of him as well, because he understands the Russell Martin system. So yeah, I wouldn't be worried about him. I think he's a good player, and I think a couple of mistakes.
Yeah, perfect. All right. I think that hopefully covers off, because I see quite a few comments on that as well. So, yeah, Glenn, I wanted to talk to you about Sam. Again, there was lots of positives, and we've obviously covered off some of the players. We'll come to our player of the week in a minute. But it felt like, again, for him, a really bright 20-minute cameo. And I suppose the bigger question that I had was, 17 years old, in a game like that, it's 1-1, it's in the balance. Obviously, Sam Edozie had to go off. But does it sort of, again, reiterate how much confidence Russell Martin and the coaching staff have in him, that even though there's more experience on the bench, he's the first guy they bring on?
I think very much so. It says that exactly. They've obviously recognised there's a real talent there, and I've not seen a game yet, be it a friendly pre-season or the Carabao Cup game, or any time that he's come on and played any amount of time, where he hasn't been a very positive influence on things. It was him doing the run-in that won the corner, and taking players on and stuff like that. And I think it's excellent. There's a danger of too much too soon. Obviously, I don't want them to put him in the starting lineup yet. I mean, but I'm sure that if we rock up next week and Nathan Teller and Sam Edozie are injured, I'm sure he'll play. But I don't think they do that through choice at this particular moment in time. It's him or Musa Djenepo, isn't it? It's really no comparison. I think the kid's obviously got something, and it'll be interesting to see what happens if he gets really whacked by someone. But he's been kicked a couple of times in these games, and he just seems to get up. But he just it's slightly terrifying. Just look at that. I mean, he looks like he weighs about 7 stone. He's tiny. He really does look very slight. So hopefully he can stand up to the kicking that he'll inevitably get at some point. But no, I hope they keep using him in sort of like 20-minute injections off the bench, and because it certainly helps us. And it's another thing that in the last knock-ins of a game, to have a young kid come on the wing. I know they Plymouth substituted their fullback actually, but they had a new guy on. But normally that wouldn't be the case. So you'll be up against tire players. I think that's ideal for him at his age and this stage of his development. And long may it continue with him making the impact that he has so far.
Yeah, no, good stuff. All right. Well, just before we finish up with Alfie and doing the player of the week, I wasn't necessarily going to talk about it, but Glenn did bring it up, and I know you guys were talking about it a couple of weeks ago about refereeing, Steve, and obviously how quickly it would take for standards to sort of slip, and yellow cards that we were getting at Hillsborough. And then I obviously saw Bobby Madley's fantastic sending off the following week at Rotherham and things like that as well. I mean, what did you make of the ref, without going into loads of detail, because we won the game and I suppose we should look to move on, but just in terms of the sort of inconsistencies, I guess?
I think, ultimately, let's be fair. The big decisions he got right. He gave the dive, which I don't think. If you were watching live on TV, I think most people would just said, "Well, that's a penalty, isn't it?"
Yeah. And
it's only when you've seen it from a couple of angles, from kind of behind or in front, where you can clearly see there's no contact, and he's clearly tried to kind of initiate it. And I think, and he's given us the free kick on the edge of the area where Armstrong pulls out the that great save from their keeper. And to be honest, I think those are the two really big decisions. Yeah. I don't think. You're never getting a shirt pull on Shay Charles in the month of Sundays. That one where he's got booked. And I think if he's not seen the shirt pull, then the only thing you're seeing is a very obvious deliberate handball. So I think,
and to be fair to him, he was kind of behind it. I know I'm sticking up for referees here, but he, that play was behind him. He was behind him. I thought,
yeah. As I say, I always sort of more than happy to pile in on certain referees when they are terrible, but I didn't really see anything from the guy yesterday to kick up a fuss about. The amount of time added on was probably right. Obviously, bearing in mind when we scored, there's probably at least a minute of celebrations.
Yeah.
So you're going beyond the already allotted amount to a certain extent anyway.
They had to pick up all the bottles, didn't they, that had been thrown at Shay Adams? And...
Yeah, why would you go and celebrate in that corner?
I don't know.
Don't
Last-minute
really
goal
get
like that.
but each their own. But yeah, I mean, the ref was fine, I thought, and it's about time because we've had some very odd ones so far. But at the end of the day, as long as they're consistent throughout the game, I don't think most fans will have too many complaints. Obviously, you whinge at big decisions that are maybe 50-50 that go against you, but there weren't any obvious ones that I thought. Even those sort of little break-up fouls that everyone always gets really annoyed about, he was fairly even-handed on them. Most of them he'd kind of let it flow for the most part. But let's be honest, both teams were kind of desperate to give the ball back to each other at times. It was, especially the first half, it was quite a low quality first half. And actually, we probably could have done with the ref breaking it up a little bit more, some nonsense fouls to get us to settle down a little bit.
Yeah.
But no, he was fine.
Perfect. All right. Well, before we do our player of the week, then, Alfie, one more sort of final question. Russell Martin afterwards also said about, he's starting to feel, quote, that connection between the supporters and the team, and the connection between him and the supporters. Can you feel that as a journalist? You obviously go to lots of the games. You see him out the games, in the games. You starting to feel that connection as I don't want to say outsider looking in, because you're more than that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm in the press box. I'm probably making a little bit more noise than I'm meant to be sometimes, because the games are exciting. The way they've gone in the last few weeks as well has been brilliant. But I think it all started with Reading, really. The reception that Russell Martin got at Reading, having not even kicked the ball in England, was just unbelievable. The 3,500 fans, whatever it was, singing E-I-E-I-O, which is a brilliant chant that we've got back as a result of relegation. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. The connection's 100% there, and he's a genuinely honest bloke. I think he gives good answers. He says what the fans want to hear, and I think he means it, which is a difference as well. There's no reason not to enjoy it. And he is somebody who's about connections, and he wants to, as I've mentioned before, Matt Gill is always there in his press conferences and his interviews for some reason, just stood there loitering sort of behind us. But he's getting him more involved now. Everyone's having a chat, and it's nice at the moment. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Well, in terms of player in the week, then, it feels like we've got Adam Armstrong in there. I'm with you, Alfie. I thought he was absolutely fantastic second half, both ends of the pitch. Shea Charles, it feels like we've got in, obviously, based on it being his debut and doing a good performance. Is there anyone else that you guys want to nominate before we have a chat to Ben from the QPR podcast? Is it a two-horse race?
I think it's a two-horse race, really.
Yeah, if I was going to say anyone, I'd say Gavin Bazunu. Simply because he's had a decent game. He hasn't made any sort of mistake. He stood up well in the last couple of minutes when the ball was sort of flying into our box a few times. So if I was going to pick anyone else, it'd be him.
There we go. Brilliant. Right. So our players of the week are Shea Charles, Adam Armstrong, Gavin Bazunu. We'll get the social media post out, and you guys can vote over the next 24 hours to see who you'd like to get in. Brilliant. Next up at St Mary's is the visit of Queen's Park Rangers, and to help preview that, we're delighted to welcome another chat with a cool first name. It's Ben Platt from the W12 Podcast. Ben, welcome to the Total Saints Podcast.
Hello, how are we doing? You okay?
Yeah, we're good, thank you. Yeah, we're enjoying a couple of wins, which is very unlike us over the last sort of 12, 18 months. But on the sort of flip side of that, you guys have obviously lost 1-0 to Ipswich yesterday. It's one win and 2 defeats in the league so far this season. What have you made of QPR's start?
It's difficult because we had a really poor start to the end of last year. As you know, we were top in October. We were flying. Mickey Beale was, we were on course to do really well. And then as the season went on, we got injury after injury. He left. We had Neil Critchley. We had Gareth Ainsworth. We had we won 3 out of our last 24. Which is mad, really, when you think about it. Think about those numbers. It's really mad.
Sounds like us.
Yeah.
we didn't win 3, Glen.
Yeah. No, but we did that in the Championship, right? So coming into the season, Gareth had a massive job. We spent, when you in the Championship, you've got the FFP, and it's all about the 3 years and not losing a certain amount of money. And we're in a bit of a year where we've overspent. The easy money's gone. So it's going to be really tough for him. So we all knew that, coming into this season. So I think, not going down is it's one of them, isn't it? You don't want to think about that, but that's really what we need to make sure we don't do.
Yeah.
So going back to your question, beating Cardiff last week was really good. We should have won Saturday. Anybody watching it, we hit the post twice. We missed literally the biggest open goal we'll ever see. But when things aren't going your way, I guess that's how it is. We had loads of injuries as well. We had 3 players going off injured. So it's frustrating, really. But we've got a lot of players coming back as well. We've got Cole back. We've got Steve Cook, Begovic. So we've got some real experience in there. We just haven't got a lot up top at the moment. We've got Lyndon Dykes off injured. We've got a young lad called Sinclair Armstrong. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's really good. But again, he went off. We don't know if it's cramp or injury or what. But so you don't really know what you're going to get from QPR. And I mean that because we could quite easily lose 4-0 but win 1 or 2-0.
Yeah. In terms of open goals, Ben, you obviously haven't seen Shay Adams at Wolves last season, but
have you not seen our open goal last week?
Not yet. If it beats that, then fair play. But look, I mean, you mentioned Amo-Ameyaw there, Steve Cook, Jack Colbeck, Lyndon Dykes. Obviously, quite a lot of experience in the side. Those players that he's brought in over the summer, did it feel like the QPR squad needed a bit of experience in guile, or were they just players that were available and he obviously felt he wanted to bring in?
Good question. We didn't lack quality last year. We had a lot of really good loans. We had Tyler Roberts, Ethan Laird, Tim Ibrahim from Aston Villa. So we had some real good loan players in, and we had a lot of youth already here, and it just wasn't working. We'd go 1-0 down, and that would be it. Honestly, most games, especially the second half of the season, we would just it wouldn't end well. So we definitely needed experience. So I think he's done right in that. And Steve Cook is. I mean, the players we brought in will definitely make us better. But it kind of feels a bit of a relegation battle that we're in, and which is annoying. But that's I think. And Gareth Ainsworth, I don't know if you all know. He traditionally is a bit of a long ball merchant, but he's realised that won't work with the players. We've still got Ilias Chair and Chris Willock, who are really good in this league. So he changed it the last couple of weeks after the Watford defeat first day of the season, and we got a good win at Cardiff, and we weren't too bad yesterday. So I don't know. It's weird, isn't it? I feel like we're kind of positive, but.
Could go either way.
Ben, with the way everyone was talking at the start of the season about QPR, and I watched the Gareth Ainsworth interview, and he said that we're only 3 points off top after you lost on the opening day. I couldn't believe that you actually then went on to win a game at Cardiff. So what was the game plan at Cardiff? How did the goals come about?
So he changed it. Like I said, he's very much a big man up top. Keep it compact, and it wasn't work. It didn't work at Watford. We obviously got thrashed. So what he did was he said, and he admitted that he played to our strengths a bit more with the little nippy players that we've got, like Willock and Chair. We've got Richards, and he changed it, and we played 3 at the back. 3. It was weird. It was kind of 4 when we had the ball, but went to 5 when we didn't have the ball. And Cardiff, I don't think we're expecting that. And so it meant that we played really well in the first half. We should have been 3 or 4-0 up. We got the second goal. And the problem we've got at the moment is that we seem to hit a brick wall when it comes to 60th minute, 65th minute. And
that's good news, Russell Martin.
That's what happened. Exactly. It kind of happened. It happened yesterday. We were brilliant for the first 70 minutes, 65 minutes. Couple of injuries. Everyone gave everything, and then. We lost 1-0, and it didn't really look like we were going to come back with Lyndon Dykes because we didn't have a lot up top. So, yeah.
I've just seen a great comment here from Barry that says Begovic gives QPR a goal threat. For those that you may not know this, Ben, but Amo-Ameyaw once scored against us at Stoke. So from one end of the pitch to the other, it blew over Arthur Borwich's head and went in. So you never know. But Glenn, I mean, with all due respect to QPR, I mean, if we want to do well this season, then this is a game we need to be winning, isn't it, Glenn?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say the same as I said before we played Norwich last week. Obviously Norwich are probably fancy to do a bit better than QPR, but we have been so bad at home for the last 4 or 5 years that and it has to start somewhere. If you look back to our season when we got promoted out of this league in 2012, we actually won our first 10 home games, and we won 16 overall out of 23. And that's the sort of, if we're serious about getting promoted this year, then that's the sort of thing we have to do. Yeah, I know we've won the first 2 away from home, but there's got to be a point that we start behaving like you're supposed to behave, and get most of your points at home. And this has to be, the first one of those. I'm, on the face of it, and even with what Ben said there, we should certainly be too strong for QPR, but we have to go out there, do a professional job, and get the job done. I don't have too much to say other than that. QPR will obviously have a game plan. Whether that'll, I'm expecting teams to come to St Mary's and try and sit tight. But whether QPR have got the players to do that, I don't know. It sounds like, that hasn't necessarily worked when they've tried to do that this season. So, but you would like to think that if they come and try and play, they'll give us problems. But we should be better at that style of game than they are. Especially at home, but I'm optimistic because the atmosphere in the crowd was very good against Norwich, even though we went behind 3 times, and the players have shown already this season that they've got the spirit to get the job done. But this should be a different type of game to the Norwich one. But mostly we've got to prove to ourselves as much as anything that we can win at home. And go on a bit of a run of home games. I mean, I don't know if you know, Ben, we only won twice at home the whole of last season. Yeah, it was just shocking. So, and the previous seasons haven't been much better than that. So we're
still not won at home this season.
No, we need to start. It needs to be a start against QPR next
week. We've won 1 game in 15 at home. Just to let you know. So I sort of That's terrible, isn't it? Us, I think, then. Yeah, it's absolutely woeful. So QPR are better away from home. So you're going to get a better QPR away from home than you would do at home. That's not to say that we'll do anything, but I think that the first goal is really key. In the game, I think if you get the first goal, we're in a bit of trouble. But I think if we get the first goal, do you know what I mean? We sit back and 10 men behind the ball, and it's up to you then to do what you need to do.
Yeah, and Steve, just from a Saints point of view as well. I mean, we'll come on to talk about transfers after we've let Ben go, but obviously it could be quite a roller coaster week of ins and outs potentially and things like that as well. So just that aside, is it really just about Saints continuing the momentum so far?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, let's be honest, this is the first game in the league this season where we are absolutely expected to
Pressure's
win.
on us, isn't it? Absolutely.
Sheffield Wednesday away, Plymouth away, newly promoted sides. There's always a banana skin there. There's always that mental sort of fortitude thing. Do your players have the bottle and the balls to stand up in what's likely to be a relatively hostile atmosphere? And so far, the answer is yes. For those away games. Now, home game against a side that the bookies reckon are going down. And I mean, if you'd asked any QPR fan half an hour into the season, they would have absolutely agreed with you. Whether their performances since half time at Watford has kind of changed minds, who knows? But they're clearly better organised than they were that afternoon, based on performances and results since. But it's one of those where can we sort of ignore the noise, if you like, of any off-field stuff that's going on with us transfer wise? Can we just get on, walk over that white line and just get the job done? And I mean, as I say, Gillingham aside, where we basically put a reserve team out almost with a sort of view to actually losing. I mean, the games that
that's Lianco you're talking about.
Yeah, the games that we've played in the league, the attitude has been spot on. So as long as the attitude in a game where we're playing against a side who theoretically are going to struggle all season, as long as the attitude there is as good, then yeah, I'm confident. If we think that we're going to turn up and it's just going to happen, then that's problems. Yeah. And I mean, ordinarily a Gareth Ainsworth like Gareth Ainsworth's Wickham team would have been a horrible side to play against in this situation.
Yeah,
we won't be like that, mate.
QPR
won't be playing like that.
Yeah, this QPR team doesn't have the same kind of attributes as a side. You don't have a load of big ugly players who aren't particularly interested in playing football. You've got some good players in there. Ilyas Chair played in the World Cup less than a year ago, so it's not like you're a bunch of park players. They've been a good team. They were as you said earlier, they were top of the league in October, and I mean, whatever happened, I mean, Christ knows how everything kind of fell apart so rapidly there. I mean, obviously a multitude of things went on, but there's still very, very clearly some good players there that are more than comfortable in the Championship, probably one or two that could play at a higher level. So it's not going to be easy. We've got to go out there and do it properly.
Yeah. Just before we get some score predictions then, Ben, I think it's coming up for almost a decade now since QPR have been back in the Championship. And if my research was right, I don't think you finished higher than 9th during that time. So obviously it's been quite a sort of turbulent period on and off the pitch. So, in terms of long-term strategy, say maybe the next 3 to 5 years, what is the plan for QPR now? Obviously they've got a guy in who used to play for the club as manager. You're talking about some of the young players. Is that kind of the philosophy they want to try and follow now?
Yeah, it's really difficult because that 9th place that you're talking about was literally 2 years ago, which was under Warburton. So, the feeling was that we could really kick on, and hence the amount of money that we spent in the last 2 years to do that. But in the Championship, when you're not got parachute payments, the FFP really kicks in, and we're in our 3rd year, and that has really impacted us and meant that we can't spend any money. We're dying to sell a player. I don't know. And I hope Chair and Willock are here come Saturday, but they might not be. Chair is wanted by Leeds, Leicester. I don't know who else, but he may not be here. If he is, great. But so it's difficult for us a little bit because we're hampered by FFP when you're in this league for a certain amount of years. We've been in this league for like 10 years, I think. So since then, and we spent quite a lot last 2 years on wages, and some real big loans that we thought would kick us on, but they haven't. So that's basically where we are, mate. Really, and we'll give it a good go, and there'll be a big QPR crowd there on Saturday as well. So we'll give it a go, and if we can get the lead and try and hold on, I think we will. But
you've got a good record at St Mary's as well, haven't you?
I know, I've been there.
Although we beat them last time, Graziano Pala scored, didn't he? So, let's after all that then, Ben, let's get. It sounds like it's going to be a moderately positive prediction from you here, the way it's going. So, what's your score prediction?
I keep saying this every week, and I sound really. It could even be a 3 or 4-0, but we could nick it 0-1, but I think maybe a 2-1 Saints, but
2-1 Saints. All right. Well, we'll definitely take that. But Steve, what do you reckon?
If we get an early goal, then I mean you can kind of draw a scoreline out of a hat. I think it could be anything. You never quite know how a team like in QPR's situation will react, but I think, let's be honest, we should have enough, and we should have enough to do it comfortably. I mean, this could very easily come back and bite me on the arse, but that's what social media is like, and we'll get all the
the memes will be out,
all the memes, all the engagement. But 3-0.
3-0.
I always feel like a Russell Martin team will concede. That's my positive. We'll say on our pod tomorrow. I always feel
that's possibly the one mistake on my part. When was the last time we kept a clean sheet?
About 1984, something like that.
It was that Leicester game, wasn't it?
Yeah. That was it. So Well, I'm with Ben. I'm with Ben. I'm going for a 2-1 Saints win, which is very unlike me. But Glen, what do you reckon?
We haven't got a clean sheet in us. Said that last week, and I've been proved correct. So QPR will undoubtedly score, but hopefully it will be a consolation at the end and not at the start. So I'll go 3-1 to us.
3-1 to us. Brilliant. All right, Alfie, to finish things off, what are you going for?
Yeah, I think I'm going to back Steve on this occasion. I'm going to go 2-0 Saints. I think the clean sheet is coming eventually. It has to be, surely, at some point. So we'll go now.
It isn't.
you guys will be spending 20 minutes next week talking about the clean sheet. So brilliant. But
what I will say is, sorry lads, I will say we at the moment, I'm not too sure we've got a striker fit.
There we go.
I don't know.
Ben, that probably won't matter.
That won't be a problem.
Just put a big centre half up front.
He likes to play games, and in relation to like, he'll say that someone's injured or got a niggle, and then you won't see him for months, right? So we've got Lyndon Dykes out injured. I don't know how long he's out. We won't say. Armstrong, who was man of the match on Saturday, even Ipswich fans were saying how good he was. He went off injured, and we don't have anyone else. So, yeah.
Well, there we go. But no, Ben, thanks for so much coming on and having a chat about QPR. And obviously, Saturday aside, wish you the best of luck for the rest of the season. Hopefully, we can get you on when we're up at Loftus Road later on in the season.
Absolutely. Yeah. All the best.
Brilliant.
Obviously,
Top man. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Thanks
Cheers,
for coming
mate.
on.
Guys.
Cheers. Bye-bye. That was Ben Platt from the W12 QPR podcast. Okay, to finish up then, a few bits and pieces. Conscious of time, I'll try and keep it to the ones that feel the most important. Steve, I mentioned at the start about the Romeo Lavia transfer finally being concluded. I think we were probably all pleased he didn't go to Liverpool. Saints agreeing a circa 58 million deal. Are you satisfied that it's finally resolved, given all the sort of media circus around it? And more importantly, I suppose, from a Saints point of view, happy with the eventual terms?
Yes and yes. I think the fact that we stuck to our guns, said basically what money we were after, and then as soon as there were two teams bidding against each other, suddenly the money goes up. We've played that really well, I think, and obviously even more satisfying that it's ended up with Liverpool having nobody in midfield all of a sudden.
Especially now McAllister got sent off as well.
Yeah, and I mean Chelsea are quite happily buying basically everybody. So I don't even know how much sort of game time Lavia is going to get. I mean, based on today against West Ham, actually he should probably be starting next week.
Yeah.
It's you never quite know with Chelsea what's going to happen. But from our perspective, good to get it finally sorted. It's dragged on a little bit, but I think the end kind of justifies the means. I think the financials that we're getting from it has justified waiting those 2 months when we could easily have taken the first offer that came in middle of June, just to kind of satisfy the player and get it sorted and not have to worry about it for any longer. But I mean, I think we've probably added an extra 20 million onto that first offer, haven't we? I think so. Yeah, I think that speaks volumes. I think we've done very well there, and I mean, good luck to the kid. In that environment, I think he's going to need it. But from what we saw last season, I think he's up to the task. Yeah. Just now a case of him proving it.
I think we'd all echo that, Steve. Absolutely. And Alfie, there's been a lot of chat over the past few days in terms of other outgoings. I think the first comment I saw tonight from Mark was worried about the 15 million Che Adams bid and all that sort of thing. Obviously, Nathan Teller to buy Leverkusen, which was a little bit out of left field. There's chat today, I think, about clubs looking at KWP, which is no surprise. I know you won't necessarily know everything that's going on, but in terms of those players, what's the latest you're hearing or particular scenarios? And I suppose, how does that then determine what Saints need to do now, probably in the next 10 to 12 days? Yeah,
it's a weird one. I mean, let's start with Che Adams because 12, 15 million at the moment doesn't seem like a great offer for him, really. I think, although I flip-flopped on Che Adams myself a load, and I'm sure a load of people have as well, because his misses last season were ultimately one of the reasons why the club was relegated, if we're being totally honest. Yep. However, he scored 3 and 3 this season. He's averaging 2 goals every 90 minutes, effectively. And 15 million is not that much money when you compare it to the 150 million that you win by getting promoted. He has got a year left on his contract. I mean, I don't know what the latest is, but as of about 5 o'clock, a deal was very much not agreed as of about 5 o'clock today. But the whole closing in jargon, I don't know exactly what that means, but it could mean that they're pretty close to an agreement on that. They'd have to buy a striker, and they will buy a striker. It's just, is he going to be as good as Che Adams? You can't guarantee that. He might be loads better. You can't guarantee that, but they have to buy somebody. It has to be a big money signing, and you have to back Russell Martin in that regard. Carl Walker-Peters, obviously, we know that clubs are really into him. There's loads of clubs that want him, but no one's made a bid as of yet, I don't believe. I think Russell Martin said as much. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. And who's the third player? I've totally forgotten.
Nathan Teller, yeah.
Yeah. Bayer Leverkusen, I told you yesterday, they've been sniffing around him for a while. But an original 18 million euros, whatever it was, suggests that's not going to be enough. That's never going to be enough. But I think that he's probably one of those players that even if you get 20 million offered, a little bit more, which he's probably not actually worth, I still don't see the point of selling him. I think that Wilcox has done really well to get the fees that he's got out of Lavia. To an extent, Ward-Prowse as well. I think there's a luxury now where they should be able to tell these players that, sorry, you're going to have to stay, even if you're not worth as much as you're being offered. So it's a big week for Southampton. They'll get Flynn in. I think they'll get another midfielder in as well. I don't know who, obviously. But yeah, I think they need to spend some money. There's no point in having 140 million in the bank and balancing the books if you don't buy anybody.
100%. Firstly, appreciate the transparency, Alfie. Thanks very much. And Glen, I suppose that's the concern, isn't it? Obviously we want to see the club being ambitious still. Yeah, it's important to get good money for these players that wanted to move on, and we totally understand that. But, there's a lot of season ticket holders. There's a lot of expectation around the club. It needs to balance out a bit. Yeah,
club wants to get promoted. Simple as that. I mean, if you think about it, the first game, between the first game and the second game, our starting 11, Ward-Prowse left. And then between the second game and the third game, we had 2 injuries to Smallbone and Alcaraz. And then you look at what's on the bench, in certain areas, and just think, that ain't enough going forward. So, I think even if Che Adams stays, they need to be looking at another striker, and they certainly need to be looking at another centre back, because the way that the bookings are getting handed out, I noticed Jack Stevens has been booked 3 times, 3 games. So
Nathan Teller as well, I think.
So the chances are, I assume the disciplinary code is the same, in that it's 5 games and then you miss a couple or whatever it is. So you got to think with Jack Stevens and Bednarek. I think Bednarek's been booked twice. So 2 centre backs. I mean, imagine those 2 missing for the same game.
Lianco's
then you've got Lianco and Shea Charles.
They say they've got 4 centre backs, but as far as I'm concerned, if Lianco is one of the 4, you haven't got 4 centre backs that you can rely on.
three
I don't mean to be harsh to him, but you can't rely on him, can you?
Yeah. So then they need to do something, and then there's a bit of pressure on Jason Wilcox and whoever else is on the transfer committee, because at the end of the day, it's a lot easier to sell players than it is to buy them. Because if you want to break it down, selling players, you say no until they just keep saying no until they offer enough money, and then you say yes. Signing players is different. If you look at it, we've signed Shea Charles, and Jason Wilcox will have known all the people involved in that, including the player. He probably knew the agent, knows Man City, so he knew everything about that one. And Ryan Manning was a free transfer. So
Russell Martin knew.
Who Russell Martin knew, and it's just a case of settling on the wages there. So, they still have a lot to prove in the next 10 days, whatever it is, to get people over the line who are A, going to make the team better, and B, not bankrupt us. I mean, you got to remember as well that even though we've brought in 140 million or whatever it is, there's a big black hole through getting relegated. So they're not going to spend 140 million. I think that would be virtually
And we don't expect them to do that, do we?
No.
I mean, we have to be realistic. Yeah.
But also there's a couple of players as well. There's still question marks over. I mean, Kamaldeen Sulemana, the guy obviously doesn't want to play. He's got one of those Salisu injuries by the sound of it. He's not really injured. And
Bella-Kotchap.
Bella-Kotchap is another one with a question mark over him. I mean, obviously if he's still here, you would hope he'd get his head down. And at least that's an extra centre half until January.
There's a place in the team for him as well. He'll take Bednarek's place for sure.
Yeah, and then you got Tall Paul as well, who I feel sorry for, because he's never been, we've never tried to play a way that suits him.
We definitely won't under Martin, will we?
No, and whilst I don't think he's up to the job, I do feel a bit sorry for the guy. What's going to happen there? I can see him leaving on loan right at the end of the right at the end of the window, sort of thing. So yeah, there's some work to be done, but
interesting couple of weeks ahead.
The one thing I would add is
up his sleeve. I
was say the one thing I would add is that Russell Martin did say when asked, will you get 1 or 2 signings in? He straight away said, we'll get more than that. I think we'll get more.
Yeah.
3.
So he thinks there'll be 3 at least. So,
is that? I mean, we've been linked with Joel Perreault from Swansea, obviously, for a while, but apparently he's just signed a new contract. So
yes, but apparently, I mean, I've not actually seen any confirmation of that.
No.
But also from what I've heard, that new contract comes with a release clause.
surely you're not going to
exists
sign a
in
new
the
contract and then go 3 days later with a release clause, are you? It doesn't
could
say
happen.
a lot, but
Well, it
watch this space.
guarantees money, doesn't it? I
True,
mean,
true.
the way Swansea's finances have been run by those Americans has been a little bit strange over the last few years. So possible.
There we go. Well, just to finish up the last question, I just wanted to briefly get your reflection, Steve, on Theo Walcott. Of course, he announced his retirement on Friday. 550 games, 47 England caps. Obviously, we spoke about him a fair bit over the last couple of years. From his debut in 2005 to his last game at St Mary's, the 4 draw, even an assist. I suppose nice in a way that he could kind of go out on his own terms, and that he started the journey at Saints and finished the journey at Saints. We didn't see him go to Stevenage or somewhere like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Theo, it was. I mean, as you say, it's probably every player's dream to be able to retire on their own terms and do so when they're kind of satisfied that they've done all they want to. I mean, you see a lot of sort of journeyman players just drifting down the leagues and kind of getting gradually more fed up that they're playing alongside players who frankly aren't anywhere near as good as them. And yeah, I mean, we heard Theo was supposedly training with Reading in the summer, but I don't think that was anything ever likely to be anything serious. I mean, to be honest, given his performances back end of last season, he could still do a job. Whether that's for us in the Championship or whether that was for some team in lower end of Premier League or in the Championship, there were, I'm sure there would have been options for him. But I think it's absolutely fair that he's taken the decision. No, I think I've done what I set out to do, and yeah, that's me done. I can now chill and not worry too much about the creaking bones and getting booted up in the air anymore.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, I did just want to say as well, a quick good luck to the women's team. Obviously, they start their new season in the Championship next week. I'm sure Martin and the guys will be talking about that over the coming weeks. They beat Aston Villa yesterday in the last pre-season game, which was a great result given they're in the Women's Super League. So good luck to them. But on that note, we're finished for this week. Don't forget that you can follow Total Saints Podcast on Facebook and Twitter. It's at Total Saints Pod. We're also fairly new to Instagram and Threads, where our username is at Total Saints Podcast. If you're a YouTube user, then don't forget to subscribe to the TSP channel and be the first to see all our latest videos. And finally, as I mentioned at the start, we're also on Patreon, where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. Just visit patreon.com, which is patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. We have 4 tiers ranging from £5 to £20 per month. Each of our tiers comes with its own perks, including weekly shout-outs for those patrons in our Francis Benali and Mick Shannon tiers. So thank you to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Andy Hollis, Matt Hall, Anthony Thompson, Saints in Exile, and Gavin Ford, of course, in the Francis Benali tier. And thanks to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Kingston, Phil Cook, Matt Rose, and Nick Reed in our Mick Shannon tier. Thank you to all of you for watching and or listening. Also to Steve, Glen, Alfie, and Ben for their thoughts. And we'll see you all again next week.